So, looking back, when you first started working, your father's an actor. He's a successful working actor, working a lot in television. How much of an impact did this have on what you've ended up doing? Did he encourage you to work as an actor, or was it more that you caught the bug while you saw him working?
I think it was probably more the latter. I mean, he didn't encourage me by any means. I was always very adamant about sort of making sure that people knew that my parents were not drama parents and they didn't push me into any of that stuff at all. But by the same token, you know, I was born in New York, and my mum and dad were there for about 12 years. And they went over there, and they were illegal over there, and they kind of had all different sorts of jobs. And my dad ended up being discovered when he was a bartender by an Irish actor who was working at the Irish Rep, Chris O'Neill. And so he started that way. And, you know, when I basically was born into a world where, you know, the Irish community was very tight, as you'll see in the film. And I think that kind of grew as the years went on as well. And then within that, the Irish theatre community was very, you know, kind of small, and everyone knew each other. And Mam would cook Sunday dinners for all the actors and all the directors that Dad was working with. So I was surrounded by these people, I guess, all the time. And I think they were the type of people as well that, to have a kid around, I think especially to have a kid in New York when they were so far away from home, I got a lot of really great kind of attention from these people, and they communicated with me and all that stuff. So I think that probably influenced it quite a bit. And my, you know, like any parent, my dad used to record me with the camcorder and all that stuff, and he could just see that I was very sort of drawn to it, you know. And I think a lot of kids are like that anyway, but I seemed to really kind of be fascinated by it, and I liked, even then I remember sort of having a relationship with a camera. So
yeah. And so the first role that you had, were you discovered? Did you go to an audition? How did that first step into formal acting start for you?
The first thing I did was, the very first thing I did actually was a short that Dad was doing. And he came into me one day in the house. They just needed a kid, like, you know. But he came in and he said, he was like, listen, we need a little girl to be in this scene. And I said to them, I think you'd be great at it, you know. I think I had a few lines or something like that. And I really wasn't into the idea of doing it. Like, I didn't know what to expect, really, because I had been on sets with him, but I didn't really know. Like, I was never into, like, dressing up even when it came to Halloween or anything like that. And he said that I needed to dress up as a clown. And as soon as he said that, for some reason, I thought, all right, I'm in. And I did it. And I loved it. I just really loved it straight away. And I really liked being given a sort of task or a goal, and, you know, trying to achieve that and set out to do that, you know. Yeah. And I remember when we were on set, there was one guy who just kept talking, like, the whole time when we were on set. He just wouldn't shut up talking. And I must have been about 7 or something. I must have been so annoying. But I turned to him before, we were rolling and everything, and he just kept talking. He was a grown-up. And I turned to him and I was like, quiet on the set. And he did, and he shut up then, and then we were and the rest is history. But no, it just always felt like a very, very natural thing. I felt very at home. Yeah. So.
And when did you think this is actually something, or was there a stage, or was it more natural process of evolution where you thought, this is the career that I want to do? Or were you like the rest of us and wanted to be a ballet dancer or a doctor or astronaut? Did you?
I wanted to be a waitress when I was a kid. A waitress or a hairdresser.
Then acting's the right job.
High hopes for adolescent Saoirse. Yeah, I really wanted to be a waitress for like a really long time. And then, you know, I started doing it and I loved it. And I remember after I had done my first show that I was in, which was a show called The Clinic, and people like Chris O'Dowd were in it, and Amy Huberman, who's a great Irish actress, was in it, and people like that. I think Robbie Sheehan may have been in it as well. Everyone was in it. And I had been in the first season for like a couple of episodes, and I remember being so devastated when I had to finish, because more than anything, I mean, I loved doing the scenes and I loved interacting with the actors, but I just missed the idea of being part of that family, you know, because it's very intense. These relationships form so quickly, and even when I was a kid, I think it's even more intense when you're a kid, because you think, you know, I'm never going to have this again. I'm never going to have this connection with another group of people again. And of course you do, but at the time you feel like that's it, you know. And I, you know, that love was always there, and that just grew and grew. But I think it was probably when I did my third film, which was Atonement, and it was a drama. It was the first drama that I had done, and I was playing this child who was so kind of complicated and in every way so incredibly different to me, and was just working with an amazing group of people. Yeah. And I think that, you know, working with Joe, working with Seamus and James and Ciara and, you know, Benedict, I mean, all these, when I look back now and I see where everyone is now, all these amazing people that were in this film, it's an incredible world to be involved in when you're that young. And that's when I really felt like I couldn't give this up.
Do you remember that, the audition for that?
Yeah.
Do you recall it? What was that experience like?
I went on tape because I was living at home. I was in the country in Ireland, and you know, it was too far away, obviously, to just jump on a plane and go over. We didn't have the money to do it anyway, but we went. My dad put me on tape, and I did my little English accent and everything. And I remember what scene it was, and I did it every time I was called back. I was called back, I think, twice after that, and I went over to London to meet Joe and did that a couple of times. But every time I would do it, I'd always do the, see, what do you think it would feel like to be someone else? And we'd always do that scene. So, yeah, I remember it very vividly. And I remember I remember meeting Joe and just kind of feeling like, oh God, I was so excited about the idea of working with someone like that. And I wasn't experienced when it came to working with directors at all, but he just seemed to really have his heart in it, and I was very drawn to that. And I remember we were in the car, it was summertime, and I was about to do a school play. I think I had maybe just come back from the audition in London, and we were trying to make it back down to the country to get to this school play. I was playing like a tree or a rock or something. I was like, I have to be there. They're waiting for me. So we were driving in the car, and Joe called, and it was on speakerphone, so I could... Oh no, it wasn't actually on speakerphone, but he called me up, and my mum passed me the phone, and he told me that I had gotten the part, and I was just... I burst into tears. I was so happy.
You're the best tree ever on that evening.
I was a strong tree.
What kind of understanding did you have, and how did you work with Joe to sort of understand what was going on in this? Did you read the book? Did you guys talk? It's such a great reaction shot. It conveys so much about Bryony's feelings. Right.
No, I mean, I was 12 when I did it, so Ian McKeown was a bit heavy for me at that stage. But I don't know, he's, you know, it's been a few years since we've worked together, but we always did have a really fantastic relationship that was really based on just this kind of innate understanding of each other, you know, this kind of intuitive understanding for what the other one needed, I think, which was probably, you know, developed more on Hannah, but with Atonement, you know, and I still think I work like this, you know, fundamentally, I very much rely on instinct, and so I think, I don't know, sometimes it's just kind of, I'm not saying I am, but sometimes it's just magic when a certain group of people come together, which is kind of, this is, you know, how we feel about Brooklyn. A certain group of people come together and the story just really touches everyone, and it just seems to be something that people just get, that we all just got it. And Atonement felt like that, you know, there was just, I think we all just knew what we were doing. I wasn't aware of half the stuff that was going on in the film because I was a kid, you know, but I think he had a great way of explaining to me what I needed to do, and he didn't kind of go overboard. It was never kind of like a lesson or anything in acting. Yeah. I think our working relationship just from the very start was really kind of solid, you know. Yeah. And I think because I trusted him so much and I trusted Seamus when we did Atonement, that allowed me to kind of delve into this other world, I suppose. And it's I felt it from the very beginning, especially on Atonement. That's when it really started to grow. But that kind of absolute freedom that you get when you completely give yourself up to the make-believe, it's a very liberating feeling, and it's it gives you so much courage once you actually really land there, you know.
Yeah. And so you've referred already to working with a great group of actors.
Yeah.
In terms of craft, what did you pick up on this from the other actors, if anything? Did you guys learn from each other, and what did you take away?
It's always difficult to pinpoint what you've learned from other people, you know. I mean, when I was a kid, really up until, you know, I would say I was in my mid-teens, you're very much kind of going on your instinct, you know. And I think that's what's so fascinating about kids. When you find a really great kid who's a really great actor, like that, you know, that guy Tomo who was in This Is England, and honestly, the last shot of him when he looks into the lens, I just thought it was so incredible. He was amazing. So when you find young people like that who are so blissfully unaware and just, they don't even realise what they're doing, that's, you know, it's amazing. And so I think I was very much kind of just trusting in everyone else. I don't know what I picked up. I know that I was really taken care of by the likes of James. I mean, James was amazing with me. He was so great, and he really took care of me. And he's the kind of guy who's really great with kids anyway. And I remember him being particularly warm with me.
And the film obviously famously resulted in you one of the youngest ever Oscar nominees, BAFTA nominations. What kind of impact did that make on you? Did it just seem normal, or did it seem strange? Yeah, this happens all the time.
Oscar nom, whatever. It's completely normal. No, I mean, it wasn't normal, but it's surreal in retrospect, but again, and I'm really glad that I was like this because of my mum, really, and my dad. And you know, my mum came on to every job with me and very much made sure that, you know, I was aware of different personalities on set and how people work and how actors behave, and, you know, and crew and things like that. But I was never exploited by it when I was young. You know, I was very much protected from it without completely being taken away from that world. But by the same token, even when I was a kid, I only ever just wanted to work. And so it was like amazing, and I thought, oh, this is great, I've been nominated for an Oscar, that's lovely, isn't it? But, you know, I went into work then that day. I was in New Zealand, and I was doing like a really intense scene, you know, underground somewhere with Stanley Tucci, and it was like back to work, you know. And I think really that's because of my mum. My mum's just, she's amazing. She's just not fazed by any of it at all, you know. She could, apart from John Travolta, when she met John Travolta, she met him at the Oscars actually, and we went, and I was like 13, and none of us, the three of us went, and we had, you know, obviously we hadn't been to anything like that before. That was the first ever award show I had been to, which is mental. And we didn't know anyone, you know, and it's weird when you go to like an award show or any kind of industry event at all and you don't know anyone, you're completely lost and you don't know where you're supposed to go or how you're supposed to walk, or are you supposed to eat now or what. And John Travolta was there, and he was in front of us with his wife as we were walking into the theatre, and Mam just freaked out. And so he turned around, his wife was lovely, Kelly I think, isn't it? And she turned around and she was very sweet to me, and I don't know if he even said anything, but that like made Mam's night. Mam went to see Saturday Night Fever in the cinema 27 times.
Wow.
In the cinema.
Is there a film you've seen 27 times?
Not in the cinema.
No.
There's a few. Bridesmaids is a big favourite, right? It's the best. Bridesmaids, grew up watching Dirty Dancing, which now I think I probably shouldn't have been allowed to watch that as early as I did. Terrible parents. They kept me away from the actors, but they let me watch Dirty Dancing, which is questionable. So Dirty Dancing, I had a few.
Yeah.
Grease,
Yeah.
you know, the classics.
Yeah. And
The good cinema.
yeah, Greece.
The best cinema.
Greece, fantastic. Some John, obviously.
Yeah.
So after that film, obviously you kept working. You did some work with Amy Heckerling, who's a personal favourite of mine. But obviously, to go from the film didn't do as well, maybe as it might.
That was
have.
actually the first film that I did.
Yeah. Oh, was it the first one?
That was
right
the very
after?
first
Okay.
film I did, yeah.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
was that really sobering experience to go from the Atonement experience to that, working with a great director, but it not necessarily having the impact?
Well, Amy's film was first, so
I'm so sorry.
so no, that's okay. Everyone thinks that Atonement was first, but it actually wasn't. The very first film that I did was with Amy.
Okay.
A bit of a mouthful. The title was "I Could Never Be Your Woman," like the song.
With Michelle Pfeiffer.
With Michelle Pfeiffer and Paul Rudd was
Yeah.
in it, and John Lovitz and all these. Graham Norton was in it as well, which is mental. And I don't know if I said it to him when I was on the show the last time, but he's actually in it for a bit. Yeah, that was the first thing I did. And so I just remember, when I think back now, I didn't know when the premiere was going to be or anything like that. And I got a little dress in Notting Hill, actually, on like Portobello Market or something. And I had done Atonement at this stage, and it was like 3 years later. And of course, now I would know the film it's not going to come out. But at the time I thought, it'll come out eventually, right? Won't it? Cut to like 5 years later and it still hasn't come out.
Yeah.
So no, that didn't really sober me up necessarily. But I feel like I've, certainly now, I mean, I'm incredibly grateful and just kind of over the moon with the reception that we've had to Brooklyn, because, that's why I think it's so much, it's not natural, but it's certainly easier to handle, attention or success or any of those things when you're a bit older, if you've actually gone through it and you've been on either side of hype or any of that stuff.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about craft as well too, because you've had so many different kinds of roles. Obviously dramas, really powerful dramas. You've worked in comedy. You've worked in action films. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach craft? Is it the same instinct every time, or do you prepare in different ways for different genres?
It's changed only a little bit. I think Brooklyn was the biggest shift for me because, the main thing for me from the very beginning was that I always wanted to play somebody different to who I was and different from the last character that I've played. I never wanted to repeat myself, and even I noticed like a few years ago I was getting the whole you're so ethereal when you're on film and so otherworldly, and I thought, oh God, I need to get rid of that and I need to do something else. And then I did like Hannah or something, or How I Live Now or something like that. So I'm always very aware of wanting to shift every time, and because I just think it's important as an actor, as a director, as a writer, anyone, you need to constantly be stretching yourself and learning more, and but when it comes to how I actually work, I mean, I don't, to be honest, I don't over prepare really. I probably sounds very unprofessional, but I don't do notes in my script. I read the script and I learn my lines, and then I go on set.
Yes.
And that's kind of it, really. I think if I was playing somebody who was a real life character, next year I'm doing an Arthur Miller play, so obviously I'll be reading loads about Arthur Miller and that whole time and everything. But in general, I've also been incredibly lucky with the standard of writing that I've been dealing with since I was a kid. I've worked with incredible screenwriters and playwrights, and the scripts, as far as I'm concerned, have always been really great. So to be able to rely on that and trust in it is a real gift, I think.
Yeah, you've worked with incredible screenwriters also quite a few times, with adaptations of really, really wonderful books.
Yeah.
Do you go back to those books, Lovely Bones, How I Live Now, obviously Brooklyn? Do you go back and read the books as well, or do you like to just keep the screenplay as the main text for you to work from as an actor?
When I'm working, it's very much about the script. That is the focus, because as I said, they've all been so wonderful and well-rounded. And with Brooklyn in particular, I mean, I had actually read the novel a few years before I even heard about the script. So I had read that, and I referred back to it a little bit just because I remembered Colm referring to Eilis's dad quite a bit, and I think it was important to know about their relationship, because then I think you'll know, if anyone's going to see it tomorrow, that you'll understand and appreciate the dynamic between Eilis and Rose and her mother a little bit more. It's just the three women in this house, and they rely on each other in different ways. And I think Eilis and Rose, her sister, are so tight, and Rose is her security, and Rose is the one that decides that she will go to America. And I think even though Eilis is completely stepping into the unknown, and she's so, terrified, and I think she's almost a little bit in shock. She trusts her more than anyone else. So anyway, I think it was important to just understand a little bit of the dynamic before her dad passed away. But in general, I've gone back and I've read Lovely Bones, and I just sobbed. I read it, and I pictured Rachel as my mum, and Stanley as my murderer. Stanley's lovely in real life. He's not a killer. He's a lover. But yeah, it was interesting to go back afterwards, because it's so vivid and you're adding your own experience to it, But I think a lot of people kind of can run away with the whole, just comparing the novel to a script. We always need to shift certain things and alter certain things in order for it to fit that format,
Of course. So in addition to these big meaty dramatic roles, you've also done quite a lot of genre cinema. Is this something that speaks to you as a film fan? Do you like genre movies? Is it something you want to do more of in the future?
When you say genre, do you
I'm
just
thinking, I guess I'm thinking Hannah in some ways has
like
genre
stylized
elements,
sort of?
Yeah, thrillers, Byzantium.
Yeah, to me they were all just really great stories, and there was no strategy really. I just take a script as it comes, and I've been very lucky that for the most part there's been a lot of scripts that have come to me, and I haven't had to audition for a few of them because I hate auditioning, as everyone does. I still do have to audition, but for those ones it was great that I actually had a relationship with these filmmakers already, like Neil and Ryan.
Moira Buffini, great screenplay. For
Moira, brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And Moira was involved with us as well in rehearsals, and it's great. You're getting a completely different experience every time, and it's so funny because you kind of, I went through a stage where I thought, oh God, I know what this is going to be. And you go into a film expecting it to be a certain thing and expecting it to give you a certain thing. And it always throws you on its head. Or throws you on your head. It's always a complete surprise, I think, the kind of experience you have on a film, But yeah, I like doing small films. I like doing films that really know what they are. And yeah, I'm proud of things like Byzantium and Lost River and Hannah and all these small little films that maybe not a lot of people have seen and didn't make a lot of money, but the people who have seen them are quite interested by the take that the director took, or the perspective or the look of the film, or whatever. And you do, with smaller films like that. I remember on Lost River, we were just talking about it backstage. The director was a first-time director, and we had so much freedom to try out so many different things, because he was figuring out what way he wanted to work and what the look for the film was going to be for him. And even when it came to dialogue, we weren't kind of tied down to a script, which was very new for me, and I wasn't used to that at all. But we all were kind of taken out of our comfort zone a bit,
I wondered about the physical choreography here. Do you recall working like that, and did the technical side of that get in the way of performance, or did you find that fun and
No,
something?
it enhanced it, absolutely. It was so great. It was even just I mean, like, you know, when Joe and I did Atonement together, one of the very first things that we worked on was Bryony's walk. And so as soon as we started rehearsing for Hannah, it was the same thing. He wanted her to be quite feral, understandably, and sort of imitate the movement of, say, like a snow fox, or, you know, animals that she would have grown up with and would have been in her environment as she was growing up. I mean, she's an odd, weird little alien, you know, and to tap into the mindset of somebody who, you know, you've never seen anyone like Hannah before, was great, and it was so exciting. And at that stage, I had been working for a few years, and so in that way, just to go back to what you were saying before, I relied on instinct, but other things started to come into play, and you're kind of able to use, you understand what you're doing a little bit more, so you know what you can tap into and what you can use and what you can, you know, dial up and tone back. And I mean, it's never as technical as that. You never think in that way, but I think that just kind of naturally starts to happen. But yeah, with the movement and the stunts that we did and the choreography, it was like that. It was the heart of the film for me, you know. And I mean, even just seeing that is so disturbing. It's like she's a demon. She's like, the way she's a machine, the way she just snaps into it, and it's incredible to get to play somebody like that who's very who just shifts so quickly, you know. Yeah, it's great.
So polar opposite, really. Brooklyn, very, very different kind of performance. Yeah. So you've talked about being a New Yorker, you've got a real connection to the film.
Yeah.
How much did this matter, and how much did you draw on it when you were working on Eilis?
Everything.
Yeah.
I only watched it the other night, so I'm like, I don't know.
That's an incredibly moving scene. What Eilis is going. No, it really is. What Eilis is going through is. So
well, you know, I think we've all gone through it. Everyone in this room, whether you've moved country or moved down the road from your parents, or gone to college, or moved from somewhere else in the UK to London, or whatever it is, the realisation that sets in. I mean, I got it when I moved over here. The realisation that sets in, that you can't go back, that once you've made that step, you can never go back to how it was before you left. And you can't prepare yourself for that, you know. It's not something that anyone tells you about, really, when you leave home. Yeah. And I thought I'll be fine. I've been working in London for years, and I come here all the time, and I have lots of friends here, and it's so similar to home and stuff. But there's a line later on in the film when something kind of draws me back home, and the guy that I have a relationship with says home is home, you know. And it's true. And I think, again, you know, just what I was saying about having such an incredible screenplay to work with, like Nick's screenplay it's amazing. It's so brilliant. And to think about any scene that I did in that film really just kind of strikes me, you know. So I was very much in that place where she's sitting on her bed and she's crying, and she's gotten a text from, you know, her mum. You know, that's the way I was. And I still get that way, you know, and I don't think you ever really get over that. Yeah. And to shoot at home was very surreal, because I wasn't even shooting in Dublin, which is only a place that I've known in you know, my early kind of adulthood, my late teens. Where I grew up was in the countryside, and I don't live there anymore, and that's very much the past for me. And you know, I was so desperate to get out of there, and then kind of over the last few years I've started to mourn the simplicity of it and the beauty of living in a place where everyone knows each other, and you know, it can drive you mad, but it's also kind of beautiful from a distance. And to shoot in a place that was 20 minutes away from where I grew up, and I had that, and bring my work world into that, which was always kept so separate from home life, was an incredibly vulnerable place to be in. And I, you know, even now, the flood of emotion that I get just when I even think about Brooklyn, it just means an awful lot, you know. It means an incredible deal to me. And, you know, all the other things that you saw, like they've done so much and they've helped me so much to learn and to grow. But to then, you know, when I'm 21, after being an actor for 10 plus years, to go back home with your work is amazing.
You talked about how terrific the script is, and it is, and I think Nick's script and your performance are just so perfectly calibrated together. It's a real, I mean, it's obviously an incredible achievement of instinct, but it's also a real technical achievement, because Eilis has to go through this total transformation throughout the film. She becomes a different person because of having moved to a new place. You presumably filmed this out of sequence. How difficult was that for you to know where you were in that transformation?
I don't think it was too difficult to know where you were necessarily, because in the scenes, you know, if you're used to reading scripts and you're used to work and the way we work, you can tap into that because they're written so well. And John, to this day, it kind of blows my mind a bit how much he understood every single step that before we even started that she took, and how focused he was on the most minute little thing that you would do or that you should do in a scene. And I think, you know, someone said to me the other day that it's a very delicate film, and it's such a great way to describe it. Because simple was never the right word. I was trying to think of I think delicate is the right word. It's an incredibly emotional film, you know. As I said, we all know what it's like. We all know what that feeling is like, what that heaviness is like. And, it, you know, the amount of time that lasts for is different for everyone. For that to then lift is, you know, it's a very gentle sort of progression. And I think that's what this film captures so well. There's nothing that's over the top. It's not overly dramatic, but the emotion of this woman is what carries you through, or this emotion of this girl who turns into a woman before our eyes is what carries us through. And you very subtly start to see her confidence build when she gets over that homesickness, and she doesn't even realise what's happening to her until other people from the outside notice it and say it to her, you know. So it was just a pleasure. It was a pleasure to do something like that. I mean, I was lucky to always get to play these incredibly different roles, but to really, the hardest thing was to strip something back and keep it as natural as possible, you know. And that was because of John. That was because, you know, myself and my friend Eilis, who plays my best friend in the film, Nancy, we were talking about this yesterday, how he never missed a beat. We would sometimes, because I think we all felt a huge responsibility, especially the Irish, felt a huge responsibility to home in getting this right, and just really wanting to tell our story in our own way, you know. And he was the one that kept us on an even keel, and he was the one that made me feel safe, you know.
Yeah. So can you expand a little more on working with John, because he's obviously one of the directors you've worked with who has real experience in theatre.
Yeah.
Does that make him a different type of director to work with?
Yeah, I think it did a bit. I mean, you know, John, of course, I mean, he would have to answer this and not me, but from what I could take from working with him, obviously he wants the film to look beautiful and all the rest of it, but really the goal for him is to get that emotion, and it's very much about working with his actors, and he just loves stories so much, you know. He sits down and he talks to you about a great play that he's seen or a great performance that he's witnessed, and he's excited about it and he lights up, and I do think that comes from theatre, because I think in theatre it's very raw, you know. Editing doesn't come into it, promotion, you know. I feel like maybe not as much politics. It feels like it's very much just about our craft, And so if you're the type of person who comes from that world and has spent so much time in that world, it's really refreshing for the likes of me, who's never done anything like that, to work with someone who just won't let me away with anything. And, you know, there were times where I probably wanted to go quite soppy, or I thought, okay, this is the romantic scene, so we're going to romance it up, and he'd dial that back every time. You know, he never wanted it to be too much, and just in order to do justice, I think, to Nick's script and Colm's book.
Did he shoot lots? Did you do many takes of each scene?
Yeah, we did quite a few takes. It depended. I mean, you know, we shot the whole thing in 8 weeks, and really, incredible. I know a lot of films are being made now in like 3 weeks, but that's usually when you're doing a lot of handheld work and you don't have proper shots that are set up, you know, proper dolly shots or tracking or whatever it is. And so we didn't really have a bunch of time to do everything. So we had to keep moving, and yet if that was another director, he may have been a bit kind of complacent about, or they may have been a bit complacent about it and just thought, okay, right, we've got that, we've got to move on. But he never moved on until he had what he wanted. Never. And at first you're kind of nervous, because you think, I'll know if I don't nail it, like, I'll know if I don't get it, because he won't move on otherwise. We still have to finish a few scenes, actually. No, I'm joking. But yeah, and so because of that, even though it very much took you out of your comfort zone, because you knew he wasn't going to bullshit you, like, you could completely trust him because of that, you know. He wasn't going to just tell you it was amazing for the sake of it. It was the best. It was amazing. Again, very, very different. I've found I love working with actors, and I, you know, love jumping from one kind of genre to the next. But the most I always learn is usually from a great director, and to work with someone like Wes, who again had an incredibly, I mean, more than anyone I've ever worked with, aesthetically had such a clear idea, an absolute idea of what we were doing before we even shot the film. He used animatics, so like basically animated storyboards, which he cut together and voiced himself. He voiced all the characters before we shot the film, and he was like, I've got a little memory stick for you, and he'd give me a memory stick and I'd watch the film before we had even made it. But it was incredible, because I had asked him the first time I met him, you know, one of my favourite Wes films is Bottle Rocket, and it's so different in formula and style and stuff to all of his other films. And I said, like, what made you change? Why did it become so set, you know, after that? And he said, we just did Bottle Rocket, and every single day, you know, they were students or they had just gotten out of college or something, him and Owen Wilson, and they were like, okay, we need to do this now, and you need to say this, and they were kind of like, I don't want to say they were making it up as they went along, but it was very sort of like, okay, let's grab what we can. And it was stressful, as it always is. And so from then on, he kind of vowed, right, I'm going to have a plan and I'm going to have a storyboard. And he's really stuck to that. So it's really interesting. I mean, we do like 40 takes sometimes on one shot. That shot near the end where we're all sitting around the table, and I think Tony and I are like handcuffed to each other, and Rafe is going off on a big rant, and we must have done that about like 45 times. And yet it only took us an hour to do, because he'd use roll and resets quite a bit. He'd never cut, you know. So it was great. Every role has its own challenges, you know. Sometimes it could be the physicality, it could be the kind of more physical aspect to a role, if there is one. Sometimes it takes you a while to figure out what you're doing. I mean, I've had that so many times where I just kind of think I don't quite know where I haven't landed anywhere yet, and it takes you a few days. That's why it's really great if you know, when it comes to scheduling, if for the first few days you can do little bits and bobs and little sort of pickups and things like that will just give you an idea of where you want to go with it before you get into the big stuff, you know. So, and they should all be difficult, and they should all be a challenge, because otherwise, what's the point? the hardest role for me was Eilis in Brooklyn, because just the effect it has on me. I don't know what it is. It's just I'm still very much washed with emotion. A journalist back in Ireland actually said to me a couple of months ago when we were doing long lead press for the film, he's known me since I was younger, because there's only 4 journalists at home anyway, so we all know each other. No, but I've known him for a very long time, and he knows my mum and dad, and my dad's an actor as well, so he's seen him on screen and he's seen myself on screen. But he said to me, this was the first time that I saw your mother on screen. And I was like, it is, it's my mum. And it's true. I think it's just Eilis, and Eilis's story is just a huge part of who I am, and I think because of that, because it was so close to me, to not have any separation at all is actually a lot scarier, and it's a lot more vulnerable. I think that's why I like doing accents as well, because your voice can really define who you are, and so when you change your accent, it's a really great way of getting into a character. So this was apart from a sort of country accent, I really empathised with her, and for that it was very very challenging, but the most rewarding film I've ever done. So.
Jimmy Choo.
Disco balls, Jimmy Choo's, John Travolta dance moves. Do I still seem grounded? So it just turned into such a drama kid. I think where I come from, I think growing up in Ireland, it's not an industry town, because of the type of people that we are. We all kind of remind each other of putting our feet on the ground, very much so. And it's a good thing, ultimately it's a good thing. So I think it helped growing up with that. My mum is just, I know I've talked about her a lot, I've been talking about her a lot because I love her so much, but she's great and she's my best friend, and she's, as I said before, she's just not fazed by any of this. So I think when you have someone like that as a role model, and that's the person who you've always looked to as your right and wrong, it's a good guidance to have, And also just as well, there are a lot of people that have lost their way, and I think I used to be quite judgmental about it. Now, some of them deserve it, some of them don't. But there are a lot of people who have lost their way because, there can be an incredible amount of pressure when the industry and the business side of it start to come into play. It's actually a lot simpler. I dream of just going on set and, I'm doing a play for the first time next year, and I can't wait to just, even though I'm terrified, get on a stage and just be working for 6 months and not have to, worry about all that other stuff, because it is a different world and you're having to adapt to all that, and, first world problems and everything, but still it's it can be a lot of pressure for people. So I think you need good people around you, and I think if you're not in it solely just to work, then you shouldn't do it, Again, it changes on each job you do. There are some jobs that you'll do where everyone goes to work during the day and then they all disperse at the end of the day and do their own thing, and that's that. There's other jobs where it's incredibly social and you're not just kind of relying on each other on set, but you're friends. And I started to have that when I was working away on my own, which is really great. It's been a whole new experience for me. But I think, if you want a film to work, if you want a story to work and really come together, you can't do it on your own. You just can't. It isn't just down to one person, even though before anyone else I would look to the director, and it is the director that I want to please at the end of the day. I want them to be happy. But it takes everyone, and I've found as I've gone on and you're more aware of how sets operate and how different crews in different countries even operate. If there's one bad energy on set, it can really affect a set, Everyone needs to be there for the right reasons, and you can feel it when they're not, So I think that's very, very important. you need to have trust, because also you're, and this isn't just for the actors by any means. I think really great crews really care about what they're doing. Like this job we were all really knackered by week one, and it was a tough job because we had to do it in a certain amount of time, and I think we all just cared about it so much. But like our crew really cared about this too, and we were all putting ourselves out on the line there. Everyone needs to be vulnerable to a certain extent and really trust in each other in that way. And a lot of people who work in film and theatre will say to you that there's some relationships that you develop where you'll open up to people who you've known a few weeks in a way that you would never open up to people you've known for 20 years or something, or 10 years, and it's because you're all working towards a common goal. And I think art just does that anyway. I think art gives people the license to open themselves up and be sort of vulnerable. So I'd love to. I would. For years, I've really, really wanted to do a musical. I don't know if I'm even a good enough singer, but I'd love to do it so much. I love the idea. I think Hannah gave me a taste of that as well, getting to do choreography, even if it's fight choreography. It's great to bring movement and to bring that kind of energy into something. And I'd love to sing in a film. I loved it. I think something about, like, Johnny is the best, and between him and Ryan, Ryan's like a magic man who just really kind of calms you down and makes you feel very relaxed. And like, I wouldn't sing in front of anyone properly, but I could in front of him, and he calls it my Mariah moment when I got to sing. Thanks very much.
Grease
it's on
3.
iTunes, I think. Just saying.
And you can do Grease 3. They're looking for a lead.
Grease. Yeah, do you want me to do Grease? Yeah.
Audition now.
Audition? I've just showcased my musical ability there. BFI. It hasn't changed at all. I think people can be really hard on Bryony. Some people have been very harsh on her over the years, and I get quite defensive. She's a child. I think when you look at this story, she's an incredible little human being who has an overactive imagination, and nobody talks to her in the house apart from James's character. She's in such an upper class English environment, and the children were kind of just left to themselves, left to their own devices, I think. So her therapy was writing and creating and imagination. And I think I'd imagine when Bryony had a question, nobody would necessarily, explain it to her or answer it for her. So she probably had to come up with her own answers most of the time. And I feel like when she sees two people having sex in a library, she doesn't know what that is. And so I think the only friend that she can turn to, since one of them is up against a wall, is her imagination. And that's the only thing that really makes sense to her. And of course it has awful repercussions, and it's terrible what happens. But I think she's not a bad person by any means. Well, when I was about 10 years old, I did a little short called Ed the Baker. It was about this guy who was a baker, and his name was Ed, and he had gone bankrupt. His bakery wasn't really making an awful lot of money, and so his wife went away for the weekend, and he was left looking after the kid, and he decided, right, I'm going to trash the bakery and get the insurance money. And there's a big hoo-ha in the town about this when everyone found out. So I have actually stepped behind the camera. No, genuinely, Ed the Baker was actually made, and I was probably a bit of a control freak about it, but I loved it. I've always really loved the idea of directing. However, I wouldn't just want to step into it and kind of go, oh yeah, I've made a few films, so of course I know how to direct. It's a completely different thing, and I would really want to technically be as prepared as I could, because I know when a director goes into something for the first time, like I was saying about Ryan and other first-time directors I've worked with, like when you're acting as well, but even more so, you're finding out your groove, you're finding your groove and how you work, and you know, the responsibility you have is so huge. So it is something that I've always wanted to do. Yeah, I'd love to do it at some stage. I'm watching Peaky Blinders at the minute, which is so good, and I'd love to work with Cillian. I think he's one of the best in the world. I'd really love to work with him. I would love to work with Maggie Smith. Our producer has worked with her, and I think she's amazing. Directors, I'd love to work with Lenny Abramson, who's a great Irish director. There's lots of there's a lot of great female directors actually that are finally coming to the surface that I've had meetings with and things like that, and I'm working with one next year that I'm really excited about, and one of those women. And but it's exciting that finally, you know, you're actually, 90% of the directors I've worked with have been male, and they've been incredible, but it would be really nice to work with more women in the future, and I can feel that that's starting to happen now, so. It actually is. It hasn't been before with other films. It has to a certain extent because it's not about that for me. But, you know, when people are saying to you, you know, I don't know, you're gonna win the race, or whether it's true or not, and it's completely out of your hands. Of course, you're aware that all that stuff is being said, but I think the good thing now is that I've been on both sides of that, with the likes of Atonement, where that buzz did turn into something, and that was really great, and on other things where it just hasn't. And I know now that it's not simply down to whether a film is good or bad, like so many other elements play into that, you know. If something like that were to happen, great, like that'd be brilliant. But honestly, genuinely, and I know everyone always says, oh, I don't care as long as, you know, we've had a great time. But really the satisfaction that I've gotten from doing this, and since Sundance in January, the reaction we've had has just been a dream. You know, we know this is a once in a blue moon thing, and this just doesn't happen very often. I keep touching wood because you're kind of expecting it to go away, but that's how much you kind of appreciate it, you know. So you just have to take it as it comes. But so far, to have gotten, you know, when someone from an audience comes up to you, regardless of the city, regardless of whether they have an Irish connection or not, and has exactly the same reaction that you had when you made the film, and it affects them just as deeply as it affected you, that's incredible. That's very, very special. So we're so proud. We really are. And whatever comes after that will be what it is.